Prime Minister has ordered his cabinet to cut 90,000 civil service jobs to free up cash to help tackle the cost of living crisis.
He wants the cuts to be made within the next 3 years. Potentially, these are the headlines, freeing up £3.5 billion. Well, Brexit Opportunities Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg joins us now. Is this the big solution to the cost of living crisis?
Well, there isn't one big bang solution to the cost of living issue and to dealing with inflation. There are a number of steps that need to be taken, and this is one of them. It's an important one. It's getting us back to the number of civil servants we employed as a nation in 2016, and it will have a significant cash saving for the taxpayer.
Although, you know, you mentioned 2016 and the fact that it was taken on partly for the pandemic and numbers expanded partly because of Brexit. Brexit is far from done, isn't it? Just talk to anybody in Northern Ireland. So those civil servants will still be needed, won't they? Well,
there are some very specific bits of Brexit that are being negotiated still with the European Union. But no, the vast bulk of Brexit has been done. So the extra taken on to deal with the surge in activity has now passed its sell-by date. And obviously with COVID, that's true in that area too. And it's about ensuring that we use the civil service that we've got as efficiently as possible. So, as you mentioned, this is a 3-year process. The civil service loses up to 38,000 people a year as people rotate out of it. And those jobs can then be filled within the civil service to make sure that services remain delivered to taxpayers, but with a smaller number of people doing it.
Can I just give you an insight from some of our viewers this morning? Because obviously they've seen the headlines and they are sort of, some of them, suitably worried. Dave says, well done, the PM, getting rid of 91,000 civil servants. That's 91,000 on the dole. You have just explained that you lose about 38,000 a year, so it wouldn't be that many. He said, my wife and my son work in roles connected with immigration. They're both civil service jobs. They are now left worrying about their future. I know this is very early, and it only was announced yesterday by the Prime Minister this morning. But can you give us a sense of some of those jobs, some of those areas where the civil service jobs are going to be culled?
Well, I would like to give some reassurance to your viewer who's been in touch, that this is based on the people who leave of their own volition, who depart from the civil service. And it's about then ensuring that resources are allocated where they are most needed, and that will be a decision for individual secretaries of state. But it's also about providing the learning and development, the courses for people within the civil service, so they can move to other roles, so that they can be properly trained to fill the roles that are needed, rather than ones that exist for historic purposes.
I mean, it all sounds very expensive, actually, all of that. And so I hope that the amounts you think it'll raise will be as high as you think. People who are waiting for their passports and hearing about the crisis and the backlog and the difficulty processing those will be worried that this is going to make it worse, and that will be reflected in all other areas, won't it, that touches the public?
Well, what I'd say is that the increase in 91,000 civil servants hasn't made people think that government is running as efficiently as it possibly could. There have been significant problems with DVLA and people getting their driving licences, which wasn't helped by people at DVLA going on strike for a time, and indeed working from home, which is quite difficult when you're issuing a driving licence. So it's very important that services are delivered efficiently, but that doesn't always mean large numbers of people. One of the great successes of the pandemic was how well the universal credit system worked, which as a computerized technology-based system was much more efficient and required fewer people than its predecessor benefits.
Can we talk about, I mean, you were saying that there's not going to be one big bang that's going to solve the cost of living crisis, but one of the suggestions that has been suggested from both sides of the House, in fact, many of your opposition parties, and flatly refused to be considered by your party for a number of months, has been a windfall tax on the energy companies. We know, and you will be more than aware, of the excess profits that they have made at the start of this year, some £3 to £5 billion for some of them in the first quarter, on top of the profit that they were expecting to make. We understand that actually Rishi Sunak is now coming round to the idea that this is something that could be considered and could be looked at, as long as we still get the investment from those energy companies into the green solutions that we want them to do, that actually there could be an opportunity to do this. We know that the head of BP has said, regardless of what the expectation is, we will still invest like we're supposed to be investing, even if we have a windfall tax. Is that something that we're going to see coming from the Chancellor soon?
Well, I think I saw a report in the Times today that said the BP had now said something slightly different about its investment programme in relation to a windfall tax. I think retrospective taxation is difficult, and we need investment not only in green technologies, but we need investment to get the remaining gas out of the North Sea, because our own sources of gas tend to be cheaper and easier to transport than getting them from other parts of the world. So we want continued investment. Net zero is 2050. It's not tomorrow.
No.
Between now and then, to ensure that
would you
affordable...
agree there's been a softening of the stance from the Chancellor on a windfall tax over the last week or so?
I'm not sure that there has been. What I would say more generally, and this is obviously a matter for the Chancellor, about retrospective taxation, is that it assumes that corporations are a honeypot that you can just dip into without any economic consequences, and that's not true. Companies will set themselves a net margin, and they will then price to achieve that net margin, particularly international ones, regardless of the taxes that are set in the different countries that they operate in. And if you put a windfall tax on them, over the longer term, they are likely to increase their prices to make the money back to maintain a level net margin. They also use those profits to pay out to pensioners and to insurance policy holders. And so there's not a zero economic cost. And I think there's a rather simplistic view of opposition leaders to say, well, here, this money, we'll just take it and nothing will happen.
But they are offering an idea that we desperately need. They are offering a suggestion of something that would create, albeit with some knock-on effects down the line for those companies, it would create an opportunity to help hundreds of thousands of people in the country that need it right now.
I think this is confusing two separate issues. One is how you help people with the cost of living issue, and the other is where you raise your taxation from. And I think it's a mistake to conflate the two. And it's very hard to see that increasing taxation eases a cost of living crisis wherever that taxation falls.
Well, if it falls on one of the companies that has boasted about making huge profits and being like a cash machine, then it's going to help the people that need it, isn't it?
That doesn't necessarily follow. Bear in mind that oil companies pay about double the corporation tax of other companies, and they pay particular charges on the fossil fuels they extract from the North Sea, so they are already more heavily taxed. But increasing the burden of taxation on the economy has an effect on the economy as a whole. It's not quite as specific as you may be implying. And increasing taxation during an inflationary period is probably a risk to inflation rather than a means of bringing it down. So you don't achieve what you want to achieve, that to help people with the cost of living, you want very targeted support, which the Chancellor announced in the spring statement. You don't want higher taxes.
OK. Look, front page of the Mirror, there's lots of stories connected to the government, but the front page of the Mirror says the address of the home of UK's worst COVID lawbreakers are Downing Street, a record 100 fines. You have been, well, I could quote what you've said. You've said that all the fuss about this is disproportionate fluff of politics, and it's not something of fundamental seriousness about the safety of the world. And you've been challenged to review that when people have been very upset about it. How does it feel to be a record part of a group that are record lawbreakers?
Well, first of all, I obviously have enormous sympathy for people who weren't able to comfort the dying, or fathers who weren't able to be present at the birth of their children. That must have been extremely tough for people. But thank you for reading out what I said, because I think we do need to have a sense of proportion on this. And I don't think this is the most important issue facing the country today.
OK, Jacob Rees-Mogg, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.